OLC4O. We are working on class number 3, assignment number 2, and we are working on concepts about verbs. And this is Jillian Percy. Here are all the ways to connect to us. You can call the studio at 1-800-465-7144. That's if you want to talk to me while I'm on air about an assignment. Keep in mind, you will be recorded as well. If you want to talk to me privately, you can call me at the office, 1-800-667-3703, extension 2211. I am on air every Monday to Thursday from 3 to about 4, so at that point I won't be able to answer my office, okay? The email is jillian.percy@nnec.on.ca. I also have jillian.percy@nnecschools.org. Keep in mind for both of those, I spell Jillian with a G because that's how my parents named it. For Facebook, I am G. Percy Wasa, capital G, capital P, ERCY, space, capital W, AHSA. You can see I've got like a little fall scene and a little avatar of me. If you send me a message there, always send me like a friend request and then a message telling me what your full legal name is, and then what course you're signed in for, and what assignment you are asking for help with, or if you're just getting started in the course, because I have about 4 or 5 courses that I teach. So if you don't tell me, I won't know necessarily, okay? There are 2 different YouTube channels. There is the schools channel, which is called WASA Distance Education YouTube channel. Now, I already recorded a bunch of classes for the OLC4O way back in September. So that is the playlist that is there right now. And that is from the beginning of the course all the way to the end of the course. It is not the courses that I'm doing right now. That one is only being put up on my teacher YouTube channel. So if you were like listening and wanted everything, now nothing has really changed between the one course and the other. Sometimes I tweak a little bit what I say, but the assignments are still more or less the same from the beginning to the end. I think I changed one assignment. So either one will be fine if you're wanting to look at things, okay? How to hand in assignments. This is my most commonly asked question. There are multiple ways to hand in assignments. You can, if there's a learning center in your community, give it to the DEC, ask them to scan it and send it to me. Hang on to your originals. You will need them for the end of the course for the portfolio. You can also send it to me by fax, 1-800-463-7852. That's if you live in Ontario. If you are elsewhere in the country, 1-877-990-2023. You can also scan it yourself using a scanner app on your phone and then send it to me, which I'll show you how to do in a minute. You can mail it to me, but this is not my recommended way. Things take a long time and it can get lost. If you do this, make extra sure that you have photocopies and you hang on to the original, okay? If you use Google Docs to do your assignments, you can share documents with me. You can also hand assignments in by photograph through Facebook or email, okay? When you do that, make sure the photograph is nice and clear and that you can read all the writing, preferably written in pen or typed so it's dark enough to read. Pencil, for some reason, doesn't photograph very well. When you take the picture, make sure your phone is right over top of your assignment, not kind of off to the side. Otherwise, the writing comes up all distorted. Also, please don't just click the share button. It will come up at an odd size. Don't put it in the body of the email. Instead, just save it as a file and then attach it. I'll kind of show you what I mean here. When you go to share a photo, it will usually say send as an attachment or just email. Always click email as an attachment so that you can send me a little email. For whatever reason, I don't know why, it comes up so much easier for us to print, okay? In the email, make sure you tell me what your course number is, the assignment number, the rough copy or the good copy, your full name. It should also physically be somewhere on the page. I get handed quite a bit of assignments. You don't want to have things mixed up. It should really be at the top of every single page, so there's no chance of getting your stuff confused, especially if it is typed. Obviously, one person's typing looks pretty much the same as someone else's typing, okay? When you send me an assignment, please send it to studentwork@nnec.on.ca. That way the secretary can log that you submitted the work, okay? And that means that it gets put into our register. Everyone can see, yep, you handed it in. And if anybody needed to retrieve the work besides me, like let's say I got sick or something and someone else needs to teach the course, they could go in and find it there. Whereas people aren't going to just go into my email, right? Already said all that bit. If there is a rough draft and a good draft, please include them both in the same email, unless the assignment tells you otherwise, okay? And label them so I know, all right? If the assignment doesn't ask for a rough draft, you would not normally need to hand it in. And in fact, I wouldn't want you to because I might get confused and mark it when I don't need to, all right? So this is a little poster put out by Adobe Scan. I use it on my own phone for doing various things like tax information and stuff like that. It's free. Adobe's a very reliable company. I find it pretty easy to use, and I am not super techie at all. You're welcome to use another scanner program, though it doesn't matter. Now, this works a lot like taking a photograph. The difference is a regular photograph is designed to take pictures of kind of bigger things. A scanner app is deliberately designed to take good pictures of writing and typing, which sometimes just don't print properly on a photograph, okay? So install it, open it, take the photograph. It'll kind of play around with the borders for you, and you can kind of play around with it as well. You can adjust the borders if you ended up with like a little part of the desk on your page. And then you keep repeating that over and over again until you have the entire assignment entered. Tap continue. Now you can preview it, see if you need to retake a photo, put it in order. Hit the Save PDF button, give it a name. At that point, you can share it or save it, okay? So our learning goals for today: by the end of the class, you should be able to identify the topic and the requirements of the particular writing form requested in the assignment. You can use pre-writing strategies to generate ideas for writing. You can also use appropriate strategies to organize your ideas and information for writing into paragraphs according to the topic. We are going to write incomplete sentences, use basic punctuation marks correctly. I believe we also, I'm not sure why this isn't in here, I believe we also talk about the types of verbs. I think maybe last term I ended up covering that in the last class, but this is one of those things where sometimes the classes are a little tiny bit different. Not usually a huge issue. There we go. Okay. Writing in a complete and correct sentence and using basic punctuation correctly. Okay, so quick punctuation review. Interrogative sentences where you're asking a question end with a question mark. Imperative and exclamatory sentences can end with an exclamation point. Exclamatory have to, imperative can. Declarative telling sentences and imperative commanding sentences can both end with periods. The majority of your sentences are going to end with a period. Okay? Avoid semicolons and colons until we have a chance to talk about them more. They're a little bit tricky to use, and until we've kind of discussed all the ins and outs of them, I would really avoid them. Okay? Don't worry too much about the different types of sentences. We will talk about a little bit about that more. I just wanted to quickly remind you, every sentence needs to have some sort of punctuation. Okay? And not a comma. So, talking about verbs, there are three main types of verbs. There are action verbs, there are what we call state of being verbs, and there are helping verbs. So, action verbs describe what someone is doing, their action. These are the kind we generally think of as verbs. Things like run, dream, think, work, sleep, washing, hugging, swim, fish, draw, write. The second type of verb is what we call a state of being, and that's where we're describing what something is, okay? It's basically different variations on the verb to be, which is things like be, am, is, are, was, were, will be, have been. This is one of those funny ones because it's kind of strange to see how do we get is from to be, and I don't have a good answer for that. I just know it is related to be, okay? That's where if you're saying something like, the dog was hungry. There's no action there, but we're describing what the dog is feeling like. Or we could say, the weather is bad. We're describing what the weather is. Is the verb. It's the state of being or the condition. Okay? The third type of verb is helping another verb. It's working together with one. Usually it's working together with one of the action verbs, okay? And this creates what's called a verb phrase. So I am buying some groceries. Am is a helper verb. It's helping the word buying. Or he has been out all night. Has is a helping verb and it's helping the word being, okay? So I'm talking about the state of being verbs because these are the ones that are the most confusing, I find, and that people have the hardest time recognizing. And remember how yesterday we were talking about how the subject comes right before the verb? That only helps you if you recognize the verbs. So that's why we're talking about the verbs now. So there is something we call conjugating a verb. That's where we look at all the different variations in how we say or spell the verb. So the present singular, if we're talking about what's been happening right now to one person, I would say I am, or you are, he is, she is, or it is. So I am hungry, you are hungry, he is hungry, she is hungry, it is hungry, okay? Present plural, it's happening right now, but more than one person it's happening to. For that one, we just use are. We are, you are, they are. Past tense singular, it happened in the past to one person. I was, you were, he was, she was, it was. Past tense plural, it happened in the past, but to many people. We were, you were, they were. And then future tense is the same for all of them. I will be, you will be, he will be, it will be, we will be, they will be. There are some other verb tenses that you might see. These are kind of the most common ones, and we'll talk about them. But you might see phrases like have been, has been, had been, is being, are being, was being, or were being. And those are all types of state of being verbs. Okay? Like, I have been tired. We are being mean. That kind of thing. It's being used to link the subject to what we're describing, okay? Yeah. So state of being verbs describe the subject, their state. Sometimes they'll rename the subject. I am hungry. She was beautiful. It is windy today. We were lost. They are eager to learn. He was confused. And in case you're not noticing, right in front, that is where our subject is. You can see, okay? This is a pretty common pattern in English. Remember we talked about how English has a word order where the order that things happen in the sentence, like which comes first, explains a lot about who's doing what. So the subject that comes before the verb, that's the one doing the action, okay? Renaming sometimes happens when a narrator is telling about a job or a role they function in. Sometimes you might see it as a poetic metaphor in a poem or a story. I am the teacher. So I is one word for me, teacher is another word for me. She is the baby in the family. She is one way to refer to her. Baby in the family is another way to call her. They are the new nurses. They is linked to or equivalent to the new nurses. We are driftwood on the ocean. Here we're getting poetic. We're not really driftwood, right? But we're comparing us to driftwood, and we're kind of renaming it when we do that. She is the auto mechanic. Again, we're kind of renaming there. You are the boss. Again, a type of renaming. We are bricks in the wall, right? Renaming, but in a poetic sense. Okay, some other state of being verbs are things like seem, become, get, appear. If you're having trouble picturing an action, that often means it's a state of being verb. It's describing what something is like or how it looks or feels. You seem upset. She becomes sick easily. It gets cold in winter. The dog appears angry. Now, there are some verbs that can act as both action verbs and state of being verbs. Some examples are look. She looks tired. At that point, it's a state of being. But if I said she is looking for her keys, at that point, it is an action verb. Okay. Taste. It tastes rotten. I'm describing how it tastes. Or I could be doing the action. I tasted the soup to see if it was hot. That's the action of tasting. Feel. He feels hot. State of being. The baby felt the warm blanket. There it's doing something. It's an action. Smell. The food smells spicy. That's how the food is, the condition it's in. It's condition of being spicy. Or I can smell the wood burning. I'm doing the action of smelling. Now, this isn't something you have to memorize. I'm just trying to point out that some English words are a little bit tricky and they can be in more than one category, okay? The big thing I find is because these verbs don't always sound like an action, sometimes students will get mixed up and have a hard time recognizing that these are a verb. This is especially helpful because if you find out that your very first word in the sentence is a verb, you may have forgotten to include a subject. So if I said, smell the wood burning, well, I can't start an English sentence with a verb. Normally, there's one exception. I need to remember to put a subject in there. Okay, let's see here. Okay, so I consider these, we've talked about these already. There are some special verbs called modal verbs, and they talk about not whether an action is happening or happened in the past or happened in the future. They're more about whether something is a possible thing that could happen or whether it needs to happen or it's an obligation. These are words like can or could, may, might or must, shall or should, would, ought to, had better, used to, need, or dare. These also are working as helping verbs. I did clean my room. Mom needs to take her medicine. Your dad could take you to the hockey game. We should cook the hot dog soon. They might drop by for a visit. So here, again, we've got kind of a verb team or a verb phrase. Here there's 3 words working as a phrase. And I'm pointing this out because sometimes people get used to what we learned when we were, in grade school. And sometimes, of course, because it's grade school, we explain it in very simple terms. And so then what happens is when we become adults and we're talking in far more complicated ways, we get confused because what we were taught doesn't seem to match how we're currently understanding things. And it's just because we've taught people a basic level and we haven't taught the more advanced level. And it really depends, I find, on how old you are. I find a lot of younger people really haven't been taught much grammar in school. A lot of older people were taught. Like when I was in school, oh my gosh, we had to do so much work on grammar and write out all these syllabication cards. Oh my gosh, so much stuff. So I hated it at the time, and you might be hating grammar right now, but it is really useful, okay? And like we talked about yesterday, one of the reasons I teach it is because it gives us a common vocabulary. So if I'm saying, hey, there's a problem with your writing, you're not remembering to use a subject, but you don't know what I mean, then it's hard for you to fix things. That's why I'm trying to talk about these things so that when I'm giving you feedback or advice, you kind of know what I mean, okay? Oh, I didn't fix this. It says, look at the verb highlighted in the sentence and decide what type of verb it is. I am going to quickly go through and erase those. Hang on really quickly. Okay. So if I look at chopped, is chopped acting as an action, a state of being, or a helping? Okay. Obviously, it's an action. If you can picture it in your head, then it's generally an action, essentially. My new boyfriend bought me a present. There's another action. The cat is black. Okay, there's no action involved with is. That is a state of being. I'm describing what color the cat is, basically. The old tree is falling down quickly. Okay, see how it's right next to another verb? That means it's a helping verb. Oh, hang on. There we go. Okay. The next door neighbors might come over for coffee. And again, might is right in front of another verb. It is a state of, oh no, a helping verb. My apologies. Generally, if you see 2 or 3 verbs, the ones in front are usually state of being verbs or helping verbs. The toy could arrive in the mail. Now we're looking at arrive. Arrive is an action, right? Something's landing somewhere. I can't think of how to phrase that. The babies will cry when hungry. Will is another helping verb. Okay. And again, this isn't something you have to understand inside out. I just want you to be able to read your own work and see where some problems are. Okay, we just did that. I'm not going to worry about that. Now, I talked about how verbs generally come after the subject, but there are 2 categories where that wouldn't be true. One, when we give a command in English, it often starts with the verb. And the reason is because commands are usually, you're standing right there and you're talking right to the person, and it's kind of assumed that the person is you. So we don't usually write it. So if I was standing there in front of my child, I wouldn't say, you clean your room. I would probably just say, clean your room, or clean your room, please. But you is assumed. It's just not there in the sentence. Go to school. Same thing. You go to school. Okay. We don't write it there, but it's assumed to be there. So that is one exception. The other exception is certain kind of questions in English. Sorry. Every now and again it will do this. My apologies. Certain kinds of questions in English, they switch the verb and the subject around. So if I said, she is in her bedroom, that's a statement of fact. But if I flip is and she and say, is she in her bedroom? I've turned it into a question because I put the verb first. Okay? We don't do that with all the W question words like who, where, why, what, when, or how. But there are a lot of times where we'll ask a question by doing what we call this inverted format. And that is one time where you would see the verb in front of the subject, but it's because we're doing it as a question. Okay, I don't know if that's something that happens in Ojibwe and Ojibwe, but it's definitely something that we do in English. So here are some other examples of the inverted question format. Sometimes that verb phrase will get split into 2 sections and the subject comes in the middle. So like, are you coming to the movies? Do they want some company? Were you sick yesterday? Was that your friend Doug? And so you can see we're starting with a verb and then we're talking about the subject of the sentence. So again, you don't have to know it inside out, but just so you understand why it's okay in a question. Okay. So we are going to look at some of these sentences real quick. Are they okay, or should they have a subject in front? So all of these, you can see there's a verb at the front, and what I'm saying is, does it meet the criteria of it's a question or a command, or is it just a regular sentence and therefore it should have a subject and we've forgotten it? Do your homework. Okay, that is clearly a command, so that's fine just the way it is. It does not need a subject. Waiting for the bus to arrive. Okay, that is not okay. I would need to put a subject and tell who is waiting. Seeing if my friend is at home. Okay, that's not all right because I haven't told who is seen. Now, because the word my is here, it's pretty obvious that the word would be I am seen, or it could even be we are seen. But in English, we can't assume it. We have to actually say it, so it does need a subject. Can you buy me some milk? That's okay because it is a question. Okay. Missing my friend who died last year. Okay, that's not a question and it's not a command, so it needs to have a subject in front. Again, this is one of those ones where it's tricky, where it's pretty obvious it probably is I am missing, or it could be something like I was missing. but in English we can't assume it, we have to say it normally. Tried to get a job but couldn't find one. Is that a question? No. Is it a command? No. Then it needs a subject at the front. Could we get takeout food? Is that a question? Yep. Then it's fine for the verb to be in the front the way we've got it. Put your shoes on the hall mat. Is that a question? No. Is it a command? Yes, more or less. I want to point out sometimes commands can be thought of as instructions. Like if I said, put the roast in at 350 degrees, it's not exactly a command, but it is an instruction. It's kind of considered the same type of thing, okay? Okay. So here we're talking about identifying the topic and the requirements of the particular writing form requested in an assignment. Basically, this is kind of a fancy way of saying when you look at a question, you know what type of writing they want. Okay, that's what we're practicing here. So assignment number 2 is growing up in the community. And basically, it's just kind of a get to know you assignment. It just means once I read this, I have a better sense of who you are. And that's just kind of useful for when I'm marking. I have a better sense if you loved school, hated school, if you're young, if you're older, if you're working, or if you're not working. It just gives me a little bit of a sense of who you are when I'm talking with you. So for this assignment, I'm looking for 3 paragraphs. The first paragraph, tell me about growing up with your family or your community. Generally, this is where you're younger or it's family oriented. We're looking for 4 sentences there. Paragraph 2, tell me about school. Elementary school, high school, if you dropped out, if you hated it, if you loved it, whatever you thought about it. Paragraph 3, this is different depending on who you are. If you're young and you're still like, say 16 to 20 or something and you're still in high school, you can tell me what you hope for when you finish high school. If you're older and you left high school quite a long time ago, tell me what you've been doing since high school. Like, are you working? Have you gotten married? Have you been moving around? What have you been doing, kind of thing. So 3 paragraphs. Each paragraph is essentially a group of sentences, usually 4 or 5, that are based on the same topic or main idea. These days, we usually separate a paragraph from another by putting a blank line between the 2 paragraphs. It just helps people kind of visually see it as like different chunks of text, which is easier on our eyes and helps us understand that the different chunks are going to be different topics, okay? Sometimes, this is kind of an older way, we would indent each paragraph 5 spaces. Like if I did this, when I was growing up, I would do this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that's how I would do that, okay? With the dawn of the computer age, and especially with phones being so common, it's far more common to leave a space between them, okay? It isn't wrong to do an indent, that's fine. It's just this is kind of more common these days. So this is how I'm marking things. 1, I'm looking at each paragraph to make sure that it's got 4 sentences and that each one of the sentences is connected to the topic and it's not repetitive. Like for school, you wouldn't say, oh, I hated school. Yep, school was horrible. Oh, school was dreadful. Because you're really telling me the same thing. You could say, I went to this school and I hated it because my favorite teacher was, or I dropped out, or whatever everything is that's new. You don't want to be saying the same thing over and over again. That's for a total of 12 marks. And then I'm looking for, does every sentence start with a capital letter? And does it end with a period, question mark, or exclamation point? Okay, that isn't a huge amount of marks, only 3 marks total. Then I'm looking for, does every sentence have a subject, hopefully, and has it been underlined? Okay, this is one of the tricky ones. I'm going to try and come back to it really quickly, hopefully before the end. We'll see where we're at. And then have you remembered to separate each paragraph by 1 line? And I'm kind of giving you 2 marks for that. Total of 20 marks, okay? So I'm just kind of getting down that we've got the basics of writing, okay? These are all key skills in writing a simple sentence, and we want to make sure we've got that under our belt before we do harder assignments. So now we're looking at organizing our ideas. Okay. So paragraph is just a group of sentences that are all about the same topic. Sometimes a paragraph can be all on its own. We're going to do a lot of that kind. Or it can be part of a larger piece of writing, like part of a magazine article or a short story or a news story. When we have more than one paragraph, we try to show that a group of sentences is a paragraph by leaving a line of space between one paragraph and the next. And oh yeah, I already talked about this. Sorry, it came up twice. Oh, here's the difference. Here you can see it with indents. Here you can see it with spaces. Okay. Now there is a certain format or structure we use to write paragraphs. It's often referred to as a hamburger paragraph, okay? And usually we make kind of a general opening statement that tells the reader what the topic is going to be in the paragraph. Then we write 3 or more sentences giving the ideas about the big idea. And then we write a closing sentence that kind of restates the topic and wraps it up somehow. And the way I've sometimes heard it explained is first, tell people what you're going to talk about, then talk about it, then remind them what you told them. Okay? Here is how that looks. This is one I wrote on the topic of my favorite class. Now, I'm separating each sentence so it's obvious what I'm doing. Okay, this isn't how you would do it. I just kind of want to make it really obvious at first, and then I'll kind of show you how it would look all together. So my topic sentence, my favorite part of high school was always art class. My first body sentence, it was such a nice change to be working with images rather than words. Number 2, my favorite teacher's classroom was like an explosion of color and crazy objects for us to draw, period. It was like walking into an antique store. Now, this is actually 2 separate sentences, but it's kind of on the same concept, so I put them here kind of together. Number 3, we got to work with so many different mediums, oil pastels, chalk, charcoal, watercolors, and acrylics. It was so fun to explore them all. And here's another one where I had 2 sentences on kind of the same concept, and then I wrap up my overall idea. Art class seemed more like a place for fun than work, which is why I loved it so much. Okay. I think I deliberately left some mistakes here so people would notice that I'm not perfect, but it's driving me a little crazy to see it, so I'm going to fix them. All right. So here is how it would look on a piece of writing, okay? All the same words, but rather than separating them out on each new line, like this, right? We wouldn't do that when we write. I run them together, right? Usually we leave maybe a space, maybe 2 spaces. When I was young, I was told 2 spaces. These days, some people don't like that. Doesn't matter to me, I still do it, but just in case you're one of those people. All right, there we are. Okay. Now, that is kind of the typical format, okay? But there are different paragraph formats, just like there's different types of writing. So different types of paragraph formats can help you achieve a different purpose. So a paragraph might be expressing an opinion or trying to persuade your reader to do something. It could be explaining how to do an activity step by step. It might be giving you information on a topic such as about an animal or another country. So while I think of these as being informational, some people approach these paragraphs more like a narrative paragraph where they're telling me about a series of events and they kind of grow in chronological order. So I wanted to talk about that kind of paragraph style too, in case it's how you think about it. Neither one is wrong. Either one is totally fine. I just kind of wanted to talk about it. I actually think that narrative paragraphs are one of the easiest paragraphs to write because you just write them the way you would tell a story, and which I think is something we do all the time when we talk. Usually we tell it in chronological order. Chronological just means that it's related to time and we tell it in the same order that it happened. This is often the easiest way for a reader to understand what happened. Sometimes students might still include an opening sentence that gives you an overall idea of what the paragraph will be about. On the next slide, I'm going to show you a sample of what that might look like. So if I was writing a narrative paragraph about my early years before school, this is what it might sound like. I grew up in a town called Windsor, which is down at the very southern part of Canada right next to Detroit. I lived with my mom and dad and two brothers, plus we always had a dog. We lived in an area of town that did not have many houses. When I was little, there was a tiny creek next to the road that led to a small stream where my family would sometimes go canoeing. There was a mini forest nearby where Mom would sometimes take me and my little brother for picnics. Once I was older, we played outside more by ourselves. There were fields all around us where we would play baseball in the spring and go skating in the winter as puddles would freeze over and create a small skating rink. It was a wonderful place to live as a young kid. So here I did kind of do a wrap-up sentence as well, but I wouldn't necessarily need to. So the other thing is you want to make sure each paragraph only has the stuff that it's supposed to have for that topic. So here I've tried to create a paragraph that has a bunch of things that don't quite belong. Hang on a second. I'm going to look real quickly and see if I... Okay. We're not going to do the whole thing, but I'm going to do a little tiny bit. I just don't want to run out of time. Okay. Not all of these sentences are on topic because paragraph 2 is supposed to be about school. So anything that's not about school really shouldn't be in this paragraph. We had an okay school in our community. It was pretty small. I loved to go biking around our community. Now, that doesn't belong there because it's got nothing to do with school, unless I was saying I biked to school every day, which I didn't. Most of the teachers were very kind. I lived with my grandmother then. Now, that's one where we could say it if it was important to maybe grandma took you to school every day. Okay, so that one I'm going to put kind of, hang on, where I'll put like a little thing. Maybe yes, maybe no. Our school did a lot of cultural activities like trapping and fishing. I didn't like English much, but I was always good at math. I moved around a lot as a kid. Okay, wait again. That's got nothing to do with school unless it relates to, so I had to go to a lot of different schools. Okay, so I'm going to kind of skip on to the next thing. Where are we at here? Okay, so sometimes people have trouble getting started because they can't think what to write. So I'm just going to kind of show you a few pre-writing strategies that can help you kind of get the ideas flowing so that you can write. One way to make sure that your assignment is in paragraph format is just plan it the way from the beginning. Rather than just sitting down and trying to write it like you're writing one big journal, this is where brainstorming can be helpful. Like I might brainstorm each paragraph separately. Like I'll think about what I want to say about my community. And then on another page, I might think about what I want to say about school. And then on a third page, I might think about what happened after school. I don't necessarily need 3 pages of writing, but separating it onto a different page might help me keep my ideas separate. Okay? The one thing is, almost every writing project needs to start with a little bit of brainstorming or some planning, okay? It doesn't need to be very long. Sometimes you could get by with just 5 minutes, 15 minutes, depends how long a piece you're trying to write. If I sat down and wrote this at the head of a page or a half page, and then think about 4 or 5 things I want to say, okay? Sometimes thinking of even more can be helpful because then I can choose what's most important or most interesting. Just grab a page, fold it in half or in 3/4, and leave some space to write down your ideas. This doesn't have to be great writing because this part isn't for me. This part is for you. It could just be a little idea here or there. Sorry, again, I don't know why it keeps wanting to. Sorry. It should be 1, 2, 3, obviously, for some reason. Google's wanting to change it on me. I don't know why. So strange. Google is weird sometimes. I know I'm technically in PowerPoint, but I was in Google, and that's why this is happening. Sorry. Can't quite fix it for some reason. All right. So here I've got three separate things. Here are some ideas for if I want to talk about my community, some things I did, some school experiences, and then what do I want to talk about after school, okay? You can see these aren't complete sentences. It wouldn't make sense to anybody else, it's just for me. I can expand these little notes into stronger sentences once I do my rough draft, okay? Keep in mind, brainstorming is not the same thing as my rough draft. Sometimes people will try to hand me in stuff like this, and there's really not an easy way for me to mark it because you haven't written in sentences. And that's one of the big things I'm looking for in your rough draft is how are you writing your sentences, okay? So if you're not sure about the difference, brainstorming could be just a word or a phrase. A rough draft has to be in full sentences. Brainstorming could even include a little doodle, or it could be very short, very long, whatever works for you. A rough draft must be in a paragraph format. Any length that helps you is fine for brainstorming, but rough draft, I've usually said it has to be a minimum of however many sentences. This is not going to get handed in, but a rough draft will. Brainstorming does not get marked, but the rough draft will get marked, okay? So here's an example of some brainstorming I did for assignment number 1. Here is an example of the rough draft. So you can see this is just random little notes and scribbles to myself. This, I'm actually using a paragraph. I'm writing in sentences. This is the kind of thing you want to hand in, okay? Okay. I don't know if I'm going to talk about revising because I don't think I have to. Okay, so here's the thing. For this assignment, you do not have to hand me in a rough draft and a good draft. But most people do not write perfectly the very first time. So if you sit down and maybe it takes you 20 minutes to write the assignment, I would still just take 5 minutes to look it over and fix any small things that you can, okay? So that's kind of what this is talking about here. So, yep, I would take in your brainstorming and turn into your notes. Some people find this easy, some people find it hard. Here is a note, great kindergarten teacher. I know what that means, but no one else does. I could make a very simple sentence out of that, like, I had a great kindergarten teacher named Miss Height. Or I could try and make a more interesting and longer sentence. My first experience with school began with a kind and fun kindergarten teacher named Miss Height. I'm still telling you the same information. One is a little bit longer and one is a little bit shorter. Now, remember that we're supposed to talk about the subject. Here, I'm the one who's doing the action. I had a great kindergarten teacher. Here, this one's kind of a funny one. My first experience with school, that's my entire topic. That's a tricky sentence, okay? And so if you found that tricky, you could always rewrite it. Going with the simpler one. I'm not really worried too much right now about simple versus more complicated writing. I will be later on. Right now, I'm really focused on, can you find your own subject in your sentence, and are you using subjects in a sentence? We've talked about this. Don't keep on saying the same thing over and over again, like, I loved my family is the best, they really love me. Tell me new information. I loved my family. We always had fun going camping. We had a big tent and would travel to all sorts of different campgrounds around Ontario. Same thing here. I loved growing up in my community. My community was the best place to grow up in. It was a good place. Here I'm being non-repetitive. I loved growing up in my community. Okay, why? Well, there was always a cousin or a friend outside to play with, so I was never lonely. We played regular games like baseball and made up our own crazy games that no one else ever heard of. So here's one example. I'm going to try and shrink this down of how this might look. Hang on. There we go. Paragraph 1 and then leave a space. Paragraph 2 and then leave a space. Paragraph 3 and then leave a space. Now, what I haven't done here is I haven't gone through and found the subject. So I would do that. I would go, okay, remember that it's normally at the beginning, okay, not always, but normally. I grew up on the edge of town, close to a creek and woods and lots of open fields that are now filled with houses. Now, There are all sorts of nouns in that sentence, but there's only one person doing something, and that's the I. So I don't need to focus on any of the other nouns, just the I. My little brother is my subject. Okay? Now, I'm going to put this part in brackets, who was my constant companion. Okay? It's not really part of the subject. Okay? Now, and we did everything together. Okay. This is what we call a compound sentence. I've actually put two smaller sentences together, and so the we is the subject for the second part. Now, if I was confused and not sure, I could just split it into two shorter sentences instead. That might be easier for right now. Oh, no. My little brother, who's my constant companion. You know what? I don't like that. My little brother, who was my constant companion. I'm going to take that part out because I think it actually doesn't quite work. Did everything together. My little brother and I. And I'm going to take out the constant companion because I think it makes it tricky to find the subject. My little brother and I did everything together. Okay? We were lucky enough to find a pool nearby. We is my subject. And learned to swim at a very young age. There was a playground with swings and a seesaw. I'm going to do a period here and start. This is my new sentence. We hung out there all summer long when we were little. Okay. A simple sentence is normally going to have one or maybe two words, like up here. That's going to be your subject. A compound or a complex sentence, which we haven't discussed yet, will have more. If you're not sure, then I would make it a simpler sentence because that's just an easier way to do it. So if you're finding yourself making all sorts of underlines, let me kind of give you a quick example. Where's my time? Okay. Some people would be doing like this. They're going, oh, edge of town, creek, woods, open fields, houses. No, there's not going to be that many subjects in any kind of a sentence, okay? Remember, word order, the subject will usually come right before the verb. My little brother and I did. We did everything. We were lucky. There was a playground. We hung out. Okay? So if you find the verb, the subject is normally, not always, but normally, 9 times out of 10, right in front of that verb. And the reason I'm emphasizing this is because what I'm finding is that is the part that people are skipping. Let me just kind of check and see what I've also got. Best bet is only write one paragraph at a time. Let me see here. Okay. I'm not going to have time to talk about this, but remember that you want 4 sentences for each paragraph. It's better to have 4 short sentences than one big long sentence, because if you do that, if your entire paragraph is one big long sentence, you're not going to get the marks that you deserve. If you need to, break that big long sentence into several short sentences because you need 4 short sentences in each paragraph. Okay? My time is wrapped up and I'm going to finish this and we will talk some more tomorrow. We should be able to tackle assignments 3, 4, and probably 5 tomorrow. If you're having any difficulty getting started, give me a phone call. I know that getting started is the hardest part, so please feel free to reach out, okay? Take care and good luck with the assignments.